If everything goes to plan, at the Singapore GP, Fernando Alonso will be the driver with the most GP entries, most GP starts, and if he finishes the race, he will be the record holder for the most race finishes. This got me thinking, what records are the current drivers on the grid holding? I tried finding one record for each driver, which also means that some of the records are pulled out of my ass. It's pretty hard to find a record for Zhou, the driver with only 16 GPs behind him, but I did my best. Sit back and learn more about useless F1 records, and if you want more useless F1 facts, check out my video on 30 F1 facts you probably didn't know. These records stand true as of the 2022 Italian GP, so depending on when you're watching the video, some of these records have been broken. Let's get on with the records. Lewis Hamilton. As one of, if not the most successful driver of all time, it's fair to say that Hamilton holds a few records, such as the most GP wins, the most pole positions, the most World Drivers' Championships, records he holds with Michael Schumacher, most consecutive seasons with at least one win at 15, which is also a record he holds with Schumacher, and he only needs a win this season to break that record. But Hamilton already broke a record this season, and that being the most races with a single constructor, which was held by Schumacher and Ferrari with 179 races together, but that pairing was overtaken by Hamilton and Mercedes, who now have 194 races together. This whole video could consist of Hamilton records, so for the sake of time I will just share a few more obscure records, such as the most wins at the same GP, another record he holds with Schumacher, as Michael won 8 times in France, while Hamilton won 8 times in Hungary and at Silverstone. A last record Hamilton holds alone is the record for most consecutive points finishes, standing at 48 races, which was only broken because Lewis caught COVID and couldn't participate at the 2020 Bahrain GP. Just to give a bit more context, the closest anyone has come to break that record is Hamilton himself with 33 races in a row. The closest active streak is Verstappen with 13 races. George Russell. It's a bit harder to find a record held by Russell as it's his first season in a competitive car. The only out-and-out record George holds is the most 16th place finishes with 6 in 2019, a record matched by Mick Schumacher in 2021. Although, George came close to breaking the record of the most races before scoring points, as he was only 7 races behind Nicola Larini's record of 44 races, before Russell scored points at the 2020 Bahrain GP. Albeit, with 37 races, George finds himself on the podium. 2 records he hopefully won't break in the future are the records of most podiums without a race win, as he has 8 podiums, while the record stands at 13 podiums held by Nick Heidfeld, and the record of most laps led without a race win, as Russell has led 87 laps so far, and the record stands at 183 laps in the lead, held by Chris Amon. Max Verstappen. Another driver with too many records to mention all of them in this video. He is the youngest driver to start a race, youngest driver to win a race, youngest driver to set the fastest lap, youngest driver to step on a podium, most podium finishes in a season, a record he broke last year with 18 podiums. I could go on with more records broken by Max, but I think you get the point by now. A record he's likely to beat this season is the record of most race wins in a season. The current record sits at 13, and Max has already 11 wins this season with 6 races to go. I don't think it's a matter of will it happen, but when will it happen. And looking at his and Red Bull's current form, I would be very curious to see if he can break Seb's record of 9 consecutive wins, as Max currently sits at 5 wins in a row. Breaking that record would be a real testament to Max's pace and his greatness. Sergio Pérez. When mentioning Pérez and records, only one record can and should come up. The record of most GP starts before a race win. It took the Mexican 190 race starts before he won his first race at the Sakir GP. And what a win that was, as he found himself in last place after the first lap and fought back to win the race. The closest active streak to that record is Nico Hülkenberg with 181 race starts and Kevin Magnussen with 135 race starts. Charles Leclerc. Surprisingly enough, Leclerc doesn't hold any records on his own. Earlier in the video, I've talked about drivers with records pulled out my ass, and Leclerc is one of them. He finds himself in an exclusive club of 5 drivers, including himself. All 5 of these drivers were on pole position but didn't start the race. They are Jean-Pierre Jarier, Didier Pironi, Michael Schumacher, and Jarno Trulli. Charles joined this exclusive club when he didn't start the 2021 Monaco GP due to transmission issues. Although not record holder, he finds himself in the top 5 of multiple records, such as the youngest driver to win a GP, youngest driver on pole, youngest driver with the fastest lap of the race. It is only a matter of time before the Monegasque driver holds quote-unquote legit records on his own. Carlos Sainz. Surprisingly enough, Sainz does hold a record on his own, but I'm not sure if he's too proud of it. Sainz holds the record of most races before scoring a podium finish, winning 100 races before his first podium at the 2019 Brazil GP. Notably, that podium holds the record of the youngest podium, with an average age of 23 years, 8 months and 13 days. As the Spaniards shared the podium with Max Verstappen and Pierre Gasly, who all, funnily enough, were part of the Red Bull program at one point in their career. Sainz was on pace to beat Pérez's record of most race starts before a win, but Carlos managed to win this year's British GP, which was his 150th GP. Daniel Ricciardo. Another record pulled out of my ass is the most fastest laps by an Australian at the Australian GP, with 2. The only other Australian to have a fastest lap at their home GP is Mark Webber, who did it once. In terms of potential records he can break, Ricciardo currently sits at 226 GPs as of the 2022 Italian GP, with the record being 265 races. But with the Australian's future in the sport looking more and more bleak, the possibility of him breaking the record is less and less likely. Lando Norris. Another driver sitting at the top of the youngest driver records, Norris is the 3rd youngest driver to start a race, 5th youngest pole sitter, 2nd youngest driver to set a fastest lap, 3rd youngest driver to score a podium finish, and 3rd youngest driver to score points. But a record he doesn't want to set is the record of most points without a win, as he currently has 394 points, with the record being 521 points. Fernando Alonso. As mentioned in the beginning of the video, this weekend will be a record-breaking one for Alonso. The Spaniard has broken his fair share of records during his time in F1, such as the most consecutive 6th place finishes with 3, which he set at the 2014 Brazilian GP. I bet you didn't expect that one. Another unexpected recently broken record by Alonso is that of the most GPs between 2 podiums, as there was an interval of 146 races between his 2014 podium in Hungary and his 2021 podium in Qatar. Alonso is also the 3rd youngest world champion, the 4th youngest GP winner, 3rd youngest pole sitter, and is only one of 25 drivers to have won a race while taking the lead on the last lap, a feat which he accomplished at the 2005 European GP. Esteban Ocon. Esteban Ocon has one of the most incredible records in F1, and that is the most consecutive finishes from the start of his career. It took the Frenchman 27 races to fail to finish a race, the 2017 Brazilian GP, where he was punted off by Romain Grosjean, bringing this incredible streak to an end. Just to put that record into proper context, that is the 8th longest race finishing streak ever, and Ocon did it from the first race of his career. The opposite Andrea De Cesaris, if you will. A much less incredible record held by Ocon is the most 9th place finishes in a season, with 6, a record he set in 2021. He already has 4 P7 finishes this season, and with 6 races remaining, he could easily attain the record of 6 7th place finishes in a season, a record held by 4 different drivers. Pierre Gasly. Finding a record for either AlphaTauris was a hard challenge, but as mentioned earlier, I'm not afraid to use the most useless records if needed. And Gasly's name was mentioned earlier as part of the youngest ever podium in F1 at the memorable 2019 Brazilian GP. I wish I could have used a cooler stat than that, but Pierre doesn't offer me anything. The fact that he's the 18th youngest driver to ever win a race is really nothing to rave about. Yuki Tsunoda. It's even worse for Yuki. The only thing that I can mention is the fact that he's Japan's 3rd most successful driver in terms of total points. And if he scores 2 more points, he will pass the great Takuma Sato for the 2nd most points by a driver in Japan's history. Tsunoda has currently 43 points, and record holder Kamui Kobayashi has 125 total points. Whether Yuki will pass Kobayashi, only time will tell. Yuki has currently 8 penalty points on his FIA license, and if he earns 4 more points until the 14th of November, he would receive the first ever race ban due to penalty points. Not a record he would be proud of, and not a record he wishes to obtain, but the possibility of it happening is lingering above him. Sebastian Vettel. Going back to drivers with more so-called regular records, Vettel holds quite a few. As mentioned earlier, Vettel currently holds the record for most wins in a season with 13. He's the youngest ever World Drivers' Champion, has the most poles in a season with 15, a record he broke in 2011, is also the youngest pole sitter, but his most impressive record has to be the record of 9 wins in a row, a combination of the dominant RB9 and Vettel's incredible racecraft. He leaves behind a legendary legacy and will be missed in the sport. Lance Stroll. Sometimes it's hard to forget that Lance joined the sport at a very young age, proven by him being on the podium of multiple youngest records, such as him being the second youngest driver to start a race, the second youngest driver to score a podium finish, the second youngest driver to score points. But the record he holds on his own is the youngest driver to start on the first row, a record he broke at the 2017 Italian GP by starting second that day. With him still only being 23 and his place in the sport being assured for the foreseeable future, there is strong possibility that we'll see him break other records in the future. Nicolas Latifi. While it was pretty easy to find records broken by Stroll, the same cannot be said about the other Canadian on the grid. The only record he broke is the most 16th place finishes in a season, a record he set at the Canadian GP this year with 12. He also finds himself in the top 10 of most races before scoring points, with 28 races. With his future in the sport looking more and more bleak, it's highly unlikely that Nicky will break any more records. Alex Albon. I will shithouse the records for the next two drivers, but I have no other choice. With 201 points, Alex Albon is the most successful Thai driver, as the only other driver from Thailand is the Prince Bira, who only scored 8 points in his career. In terms of more legitimate records, Alex finds himself in the top 10 of most points without a win, although it's quite off the record as it stands at 521 points. Zhou Guanyu. As I've mentioned it with Alex, Zhou's record is shithousing it, as his record is that of the most successful Chinese driver, a record he broke by participating in an official GP, and a record he keeps breaking by scoring points. To be fair to me and Zhou, he only participated in 16 GPs, making him breaking any records quite improbable, although not impossible. Valtteri Bottas. Going back to actual records, the Finnish driver holds a surprising amount. He holds the record of most career points without being world champion, the most pole positions without winning a championship with 20 pole positions, the second most career podiums without becoming world champion with 67, and he's only one behind record holder Rubens Barrichello. And he holds the record of the most consecutive Q3 appearances with 103. Kevin Magnussen. Magnussen holds an unbreakable record. It's a record he shares with 22 other drivers, but by scoring a podium in his first ever race at the 2014 Australian GP, the Dane marked his name in the record books forever. He also participated in the second most GPs without being in the lead. He currently participated in 135 races, and with the record being at 158 races, held by Martin Brundle, there is a very strong possibility that Magnussen will hold the record on his own by the end of the next season. Mick Schumacher. The Schumacher name appears quite often in F1 record books, but the first name coming with it is Michael, and not Mick. To be fair to Mick, he's only spent a year and a half in the sport so far, so he didn't really have the time to put his own name in record books. The closest he's come to beating a record is the most races before scoring points, where he's fourth on the list with 32 races before scoring points. Hopefully, Mick gets a chance to stay in the sport and break some of his father's records. Now, this year we've had 22 drivers in total, and I thought that it wouldn't be fair not to include them. Surprisingly enough, Nick de Vries already has a record, despite taking part in only one race. By scoring points at Monza, he's part of a club of 6 other drivers to have scored points in every race they participated in. And the other replacement driver this season has been Nico Hülkenberg, who holds one of the most famous records. And that is, the most races without scoring a podium, as he currently is at 181 race starts and still looking for his first podium. Other than this, he also holds the record for most points without a win, with 521 points, and he's the 10th youngest pole sitter. As time goes on, it seems less and less likely that the German will finally stand on the podium of an F1 race. And with that, I've gone over every current driver and tried to find a record they're holding, even if some of the records are a bit iffy, at best. Remember that these records are true as of the Italian GP, and there's a strong possibility that they will be broken by the time you watch the video. But as the Michael once said,
records are there to be beaten, and I'm quite relaxed that one day it will happen.
Let me know in the comments below what is your favorite F1 record, and leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.